Welcome to Grim Pixels, where I play old games for your enjoyment and stuff. My name's Greg. Thanks for stopping by. Today's retrospective is a look at Food Fight on the Atari 7800. This one is quite old at this point, having released all the way back in 1986. But keep in mind, it was a port of an arcade game that was originally released back in 1983, making this a 40-year-old game. Crikey. It was developed by General Computer Corporation and published by Atari. This one is fairly well known, but may not quite be considered a classic. At least not in the same way as Pac-Man. For me, however, it totally is. I loved Food Fight as a kid. I played it often and I played it for long periods of time, but I was also 8 and I had maybe 3 or 4 other games. Still, I have very fond memories of playing this in my childhood, which is why I wanted it to be one of my early retrospectives. It may mean my perspective is tainted by nostalgic rosy glasses, so keep that in mind. On top of that, well, it's an arcade game, and I'm a sucker for arcade games. Anyways, Food Fight is a strange little game. You play as a little blonde-haired boy named Charlie Chuck. Of course, Charlie really likes ice cream, and that's all he wants to eat. However, this has seriously pissed off 4 chefs named Oscar, Angelo, Jacques, and Zorba. Honestly, I love how old games named their almost impossible to distinguish enemies. It always made me laugh. Charlie starts out each level on the right-hand side of the screen with an ice cream cone on the left-hand side. His goal is to eat the ice cream before the chefs catch him, or before they hit him with food. The chefs appear out of holes in the ground, which Charlie also needs to watch out for, and that's about it. Well, there is a bit more to it. You can bring food to the next level, for example, and there are instant replays when you do something cool, but they do go on a bit too long and you can't skip them. Then again, that's more of a modern complaint than anything else. But that's all the game needs to be, really. As you progress, things move faster. The chefs spawn faster and they start throwing food at you. In fact, while there are 125 levels, the challenge increases fairly significantly, fairly quickly. You get points for taking out the chefs. That's a hard word to say, and it doesn't sound right. Chefs? I don't know. Anyway, you get points for taking out the chefs and they increase until level 50, but from then on, the scoring remains unchanged. The real problem I have is the random nature of the game. Each level will start with a certain amount of food and a certain number of holes from which the chefs can appear, but where it all appears is random, so sometimes you get a lucky roll and other times you don't. I guess this makes the game much harder to master, but I imagine it pisses off those that are trying for high scores. That said, the current high score is ridiculously high, so maybe I'm wrong and just a bit crap. Probably. Interestingly, for an arcade title that was somewhat popular back in the day, it didn't receive many ports, only ending up on Atari's 8-bit systems. Apart from that, there were some clones released on 8 and 16-bit systems, but it didn't have much of an impact beyond that. In fact, it was never remade. And the only port, if you can call it that, is a version that was included in Microsoft's Game Room on the Xbox 360 for those of us that can remember that service, which was pretty cool. I liked it, at least. Anyway, here are my thoughts. Honestly, it looks pretty great for a game from the early 80s, but when you consider that this particular port was released in 1986 on a system intended to compete with the NES and Sega Master System, it's not hard to understand why the Atari 7800 isn't more well-loved. Still, for what it's worth, it's a simple game with simple tunes, a simple title screen, and I guess it doesn't need to be much more than that. That said, there's just not much to it for 1986, considering Fantasy Zone, Outrun, and Rygar were all released on the Master System in the same year, amongst many other games including Bubble Bobble, which is one of my favourites, and the NES saw games like Zelda, Metroid, and Kid Icarus. Of course, the 7800 had its share of great games, but most were simple arcade ports. Of course, being an arcade port, you can choose the starting level, which is helpful and probably added a whole lot of replayability at the time. I know it did for me. In the end, I still only managed 30 minutes before I'd had enough this time around. Yes, Food Fight is still fun, and yes, I occasionally like to boot it up and spend 10 minutes or so throwing food at French chefs. Chefs? See what I mean? That's a shit word. But even playing this for 30 minutes was a tough ask. If you want to play this now, well, you gotta find the original, pretty much. You could always play the Atari 800 version, which is included on the Atari 50 collection. I think the 7800 version is superior. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again, buy the Atari 50 collection. It's amazing. But, and this is a big but, and we all like big buts and we cannot lie, a remake was announced back in 2021. I kept that one quiet until now for added impact. Did you feel the impact? I did. But anyway, it was announced back in 2021, but there's been nothing but crickets and tumbleweeds since. So maybe it's coming and maybe it's not. Only time will tell for more food fight. Anyway, that's it for another retrospective. Thanks for stopping by Dim Pixels. You got a game you want to recommend? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope to see you next time. Let's play all the games.